Welcome back to the podcast. Today I want to talk about a shift I'm making from industry level to business specific forecasting. And this is something that I've been thinking about for a while, and this will probably kick off in May. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit before that actually happens. So if you've been following me this year, you know that I launched the cyber risk forecast as both a probabilistic model and a podcast. It's a pet project of mine that I started 2 years ago. I wanted to share some of that journey with you, as well as some of the amazing things this model has been able to tell us about risk and how we can better manage that cyber risk. First, for those of you that might be new here, let me give you a quick recap of my experience with risk quantification and forecasting. So I started doing this work for Nuclear Regulatory Commission, reporting directly to the CISO and the CIO and executives. I developed probabilistic models to answer whatever questions they had about cyber risk. I also developed a university-level curriculum and a textbook on cyber risk quantification, and I taught that course at Boise State for a brief period. So my approach has always been about the application of probability to forecast based on the data available. Now, it turns out that there's plenty of data available to forecast very accurate industry and business specific risks. The challenge is in synthesizing the data and building a transparent, auditable, stable, and a defensible model. Now, the driving force behind this work was the desire to educate the industry and CISOs and give them data they need to make better risk-informed decisions. Integrating risk quantification into your existing risk management practice should be effortless when the risk is already analyzed and quantified for your industry and specific business. So let me tell you a little bit about what we've learned from this deep analysis so far. The industry level forecasting plays an important role in risk management because it provides context and situational awareness. Now, most organizations are focused internally. They're focusing on their applied defenses. There is no analysis to model what is actually happening external in the threat environment, and there's no deep understanding of those risk drivers. So there's no established industry baseline for measuring the effectiveness of the controls, and no insight into emerging risks and attack methods. This means that the work most people are doing is biased, and that there's a blind spot in their basic understanding of risk. So let me give you an example of how this bias looks in reality. You probably know an organization that values pen testing. Now, in my opinion, the greatest value of a pen test is to provide skeptics the validation about vulnerability. As human beings, we want to think that we're doing a good job, and we deny the very existence of risk, because if we acknowledge it, we have to face some pretty scary realities. So in the world of cybersecurity, pen testing is a way to rip back that veil of denial and come to grips with some of those realities. Our systems are more easily hacked than we would like to think. So risk analysis and forecasting is like a virtual pen test. When it's done right, it reveals the probability of any type of attack without having to accomplish the technical steps. And yes, I have many times forecast an attack that within a short period of time actually occurred. So some of the things that the past industry level forecasts have revealed include a deep understanding into how the risk environment changed permanently over the 2025 holiday season, including two primary drivers: the increased use of AI by attackers and the February 28th initiation of hostilities between US and Iran, and why we're not ever going to return to the cyclic patterns that we had prior to this. So the forecast so far has been able to measure the reduction of effectiveness of controls and the effectiveness of AI used by attackers in the threat environment. And now that we've had a sufficient number of cycles doing the industry-specific forecast, I'm going to be throttling this down from the industries to the businesses. So the next phase of the risk forecast will be business-specific. And that's incredibly powerful because CISOs will now have the accurate risk analysis quantified specific not only to their industry but to their business. And finally, the guesswork and the expense is gone. Adoption of risk quantification will become effortless. Imagine being able to answer the questions executives are asking, like, what changed this month? What are my top risks and how am I doing compared to other businesses in the industry? How we look at cyber risk forecasting in the cyber risk business, I think, needs to change. Um, so every forecast currently is based on recorded fact, observable events, and known methods. And this is an opinion, it's a mathematically quantified probability. So I think it's time that CISOs begin to use this data, use the cyber risk forecast to effectively drive risk decisions in the same way that we see other industries using data like this. For example, energy companies rely on dynamic load forecasting to balance the grid. They use weather patterns, historical usage, industrial schedules to predict how much power will be needed in the next 30 days. In the same way, CISOs can now use the cyber risk forecast to pre-provision defensive resources or focus monitoring on specific vectors. Logistics and supply companies use predictive maintenance. Airlines and shipping giants use sensor-driven predictive analytics to decide when to pull a vehicle off service before it breaks down. Interestingly enough, nuclear and space industries also use probabilistic forecasting for safety analysis to maintain equipment and replace components before they wear out and reach a point of failures. So CISOs can use the cyber risk forecast to develop patching priorities that make sense relative to the forecast threat environment rather than emergency after the fact patching like we do now. Here's another example. Agriculture uses subseasonal weather forecasts to go beyond will it rain today and instead predict soil moisture and temperature trends for the next months. So farmers can decide when to plant, early or delayed, based on this 30-day outlook. CISOs and CEOs might delay major cloud migration or a new product launch if the forecast indicates a specific surge in a related exploit. Here's another example. Insurance companies use catastrophic modeling with statistical data on things like hurricanes, wildfires, and floods to price their premiums and manage the risk appetite. The monthly cyber risk forecast can help companies decide if they are overexposed. It could be a guide for whether they should increase cyber insurance or invest the same amount of money into internal controls based on top and emerging risks. Here's a financial investment analogy. CISOs and CEOs can think of the cyber risk forecast as their own volatility index, like the Chicago Board Options Exchange Volatility Index, which is a popular measure of the stock market's expectation of volatility based on the S&P 500 index options. The cyber risk forecast uses open source intelligence and applies a structured methodology and basic probabilistic calculations to accurately forecast both the likelihood and financial impacts of the upcoming 30, 60, and 90-day period. So, if you are a CISO or a CEO and you want to make better risk-informed decisions, look for the business-specific cyber risk forecast to be released in May. And follow me on LinkedIn and be sure to keep listening to this podcast, and I'll see you in the next video.